Hey there, and welcome. Today, we're going to get into the real science of recovery. We're talking about exercise therapy. And no, this isn't just about working out after an injury. It's way more precise than that. Think of it as a whole language of movement designed to heal, retrain, and totally restore our bodies. So let's dive right in. Okay, so here's the plan for our journey today. First, we'll tackle the why behind all this. Then, we'll get into the two main types of movement, active versus passive. After that, we'll look at the different stages of active exercise, check out some hands-on therapist techniques, and finally see how it all comes together to retrain, both the body and the brain. All right, section 1, the goal of exercise therapy. Why do we actually move to heal? So what's the whole point of all this? Well, it goes way deeper than just, getting back on your feet. Therapeutic exercise is really about strategically rebuilding how you function, literally from the ground up, and doing it as safely and efficiently as we possibly can. So this really breaks it all down into three key aims. First off, it's about getting you moving and stopping all the bad stuff that comes from being inactive. Simple enough, right? Second, it's about fixing any muscle problems, the inefficiencies, to get your full range of motion back. And finally, the big one. It's all designed to speed up your recovery and get you back to doing your everyday things. Okay, let's get into our next section, active versus passive movement, the core distinction. Now, this right here, this is the central idea for this entire explainer. Seriously, every single therapeutic movement you can think of falls into one of these two buckets, active or passive. And getting this difference is absolutely key to understanding everything else we're going to talk about. And this breaks it down perfectly. Active movement, that's when you do it. Your muscles are providing the power, you are the engine behind the motion. But passive movement, that's when it's done to you. Some other force, maybe your therapist, maybe a machine, is creating the movement. It's a really simple idea, but trust me, it's an incredibly powerful one. So let's take a closer look at how this all works, and we'll start with the active side of things. So let's explore the spectrum of active exercise, from a little help to a big challenge. Look, active exercise isn't just one single thing. It's much better to think of it like a spectrum, or kind of like a journey that a muscle goes on. It starts out needing a ton of help, and slowly works its way up to tackling these huge challenges all on its own. And this lays out that path just perfectly. It all begins with assisted movement. Think of it like putting training wheels on your muscles. Then you graduate to free movement, where you're strong enough to just work against gravity. From there, it gets a little more complex with assisted, resisted, and finally you hit resisted exercise, which is pretty much what we all think of as strength training. So let's talk about that first step, assisted exercise. The key thing to get here is that this is for when a muscle is just, it's too weak to do the job by itself. So an outside force, like maybe the therapist's hand, just helps it finish the movement. This is so important in the early stages because it's literally helping the brain remember the correct pattern. It's like rewiring that connection between the brain and the muscle. Okay, next up, we have free exercise. So now your muscles have gotten strong enough to go it alone, just working against gravity. That's it. No other forces involved. This could be something really specific, like, say, lifting your arm to work on your shoulder, or it could be something big in general, like swimming, where you're using muscles all over. This is really where you start building that muscle tone and real power. And that brings us to the top of the mountain, resisted exercises. Now, an external force is actively working against your muscles. And because of that opposition, your muscles have to work way harder, creating more tension. What happens next? Well, they respond by getting stronger and bigger. There's a fancy word for it, hypertrophy, but it really just means muscle growth. This is the whole idea behind pretty much any kind of strength training or weightlifting. Now, just to round out this whole active category, we've got to quickly talk about reflex movement. This is the stuff you don't even think about. It's not a choice, it's just an automatic, involuntary response. Like when you accidentally touch a hot stove and your hand just yanks back. Yep, that's it. That's your body's automatic protection system kicking in, and it's a super important part of how we move. All right, section 4, the therapist's touch, understanding passive movement. Okay, let's totally switch gears here. We've talked all about what happens when you're the one doing the moving, but what about when the movement is done to you? Well, welcome to the world of passive movement, where the skill of the therapist is often everything. And this quote really just nails the definition. The key phrase to lock onto here is during muscle inactivity. For any of this passive stuff to work, The patient has to be completely relaxed, just letting that external force do 100% of the work. See, the goal here isn't to build strength at all. It's something totally different. A perfect example of this is a good old controlled, sustained stretch. And that slow and steady approach is everything. Why? Because if you try to stretch a muscle too fast, it has this protective reflex that makes it tighten up and fight you. It kind of panics. But if you go slowly and hold that stretch, you're giving the muscle time to relax and actually lengthen out. And that's how you gradually build up flexibility. Okay, so now we're going to get into mobilizing your joints. This is a real expert intervention. We're moving beyond just basic stretching here. These are highly skilled passive techniques. And we're not just talking about muscles anymore. This is all about a therapist using these super precise movements to get your joints, the joints themselves, to work better. And to be super specific about it, therapists use a system like this one. It's called Maitland's grading system. As you can see, it's all about different grades of movement, from really gentle to, let's say, more assertive. So a grade 1 is just a tiny little movement, mainly for pain relief. A grade 2 is a bigger movement, but it stays within that comfortable, available range. Then you get to grades 3 and 4, and now the therapist is intentionally pushing into stiffness to really stretch things out and get that motion back. It's an incredibly precise way to target exactly what's wrong. But you might have noticed there's one missing. What about grade 5? Well, that one gets its very own moment because it's a whole different ballgame. So grade 5 is what's known as a thrust technique or manipulation. It's a very quick, very controlled thrust that's applied to a joint. And let's just clear this up right now. That famous pop or crack you hear, it is not your bones grinding. Not at all. It's just gas bubbles being released from the fluid inside the joint. That's it. The goal is exactly the same as the other grades. Less pain, more motion, but the technique itself is just much more powerful and specific. Okay, let's move on to our final section, retraining the body and brain and putting it all together. So think about it. We've got active movements to build up our strength, and we've got passive movements to get our range of motion back. But the final critical piece of this puzzle is putting all of that together to get back coordinated, useful movement. And that is all about re-education. You see, after an injury or some kind of neurological issue, that connection between your brain and your muscles can get, well, fuzzy. It's like a faulty phone line. Re-education is literally the process of rebuilding those connections. Sometimes the brain even has to find totally new pathways, new routes, to help you get that precise control back over your movements. And a classic example of this in action is a set of exercises called Frankel's exercises. It all starts with the patient lying down, which is smart because it basically takes gravity out of the equation. And then they do these very simple, very deliberate movements, like sliding a heel up and down the bed. The real focus isn't on strength here. It's on concentration, on being precise and really feeling every part of that movement. Then, once those basic patterns start to click again, it's time to level up. The patient progresses to doing exercises while sitting, and now, all of a sudden, you've got new challenges. You need balance, you need core control. The tasks get a little harder, like, say, lifting your leg and trying to place your heel on a very specific spot on the floor. And this is the final step, where it all comes together. All those skills you learned while lying down and sitting, now they get integrated into actual, real-world activities. Things like standing up, shifting your weight, walking carefully along a line, turning around. All these things are designed to retrain the body and brain to work together perfectly, seamlessly, for just normal, everyday life. So when you look back at everything from that simple assisted lift all the way to a complex walking pattern, it really makes you see that exercise therapy is this incredibly detailed science. It's a powerful reminder that every single movement we make, big or small, has a purpose behind it. So how does knowing all this change your perspective on movement? Maybe next time you just get up and walk across the room, you'll think for a second about that incredible, silent conversation happening between your muscles, your joints, and your brain. Thanks for joining me.